Hello, Virgo. Thank you for being here. Someone's been broadcasting signal you haven't been receiving. Subscribe immediately because this message has been trying to reach you. So, there's persistent communication attempting to penetrate your awareness right now. And the desperation in that attempt, the intensity of it, the repeated nature of it, reveals that what they're trying to convey carries weight for them, matters urgently to them, creates pressure in them that builds with each failed attempt to get through to you. And the tragic comedy of the situation is that they're speaking, they're signaling, they're reaching, but you're not hearing, not seeing, not registering what they're trying so hard to communicate because you're looking in wrong direction, listening on wrong frequency, interpreting their signals as noise rather than message, or worse, missing the signals entirely because you're not even watching for communication from this particular source. This isn't about them being too subtle or you being deliberately obtuse. It's about mismatch between how they're expressing and how you're receiving. About them using language you're not fluent in. About them sending smoke signals while you're watching for carrier pigeons. About them trying to reach you through channels you're not monitoring because you've assumed silence from them, assumed indifference, assumed they're not thinking about you or wanting to communicate with you, when actually they're thinking about you constantly, wanting desperately to communicate, just unable to find method that breaks through your defenses or your obliviousness or your focus elsewhere. And the oh my God that punctuates this realization, that's recognition of how much you've been missing, how long this has been happening without your awareness, how many signals have gone unnoticed while you've been assuming static, how different your understanding of the situation would be if you'd been picking up what they've been putting down. How much clearer your choices would be if you knew what they've been trying to tell you, how the entire dynamic shifts once you finally tune in to the frequency they've been broadcasting on while you've been listening to a completely different station. In the particular frustration of trying to communicate with someone who isn't receiving, who can't or won't or doesn't know how to tune into what you're sending, there's desperation that builds, effort that intensifies, creativity that gets deployed, trying different methods, different angles, different approaches, hoping something finally lands, something finally registers, something finally gets through the wall or the distance or the misunderstanding that's been preventing connection. They've been trying, they're still trying, they'll keep trying until either you finally receive or they finally exhaust themselves and give up. And the window between their current desperation and their eventual resignation might be narrower than you realize, might be closing even as you're hearing this, might require you to start paying attention immediately if you want to catch what they've been broadcasting before they stop broadcasting it altogether. Let me illuminate what signals you might be missing and why you're missing them. In the landscape of missed communications, certain patterns appear consistently when people are sending messages that aren't being received. Indirect communication tops the list. They're not saying directly what they mean because fear or pride or uncertainty makes direct communication feel too vulnerable. So they're hinting, implying, suggesting, dropping breadcrumbs, hoping you'll pick up the trail and follow it to the actual message they can't quite speak plainly. They're liking your posts with suspicious consistency. They're showing up in your spaces with improbable frequency. They're asking mutual friends about you. They're creating opportunities to cross paths. All of it communicating, I'm thinking about you. I want connection with you. I miss you or want you or need you. But none of it saying those words directly, hoping the pattern of behavior speaks what their mouth won't say. Your current reality likely contains exactly this kind of indirect signaling. Someone who's been engaging with your digital presence more than seems casual. Someone who's been creating reasons to contact you, even though the stated reasons feel like excuses. Someone who's been hovering in your periphery, waiting for opening to approach more directly. Someone whose behavior suggests interest, their words don't explicitly confirm. You've been noticing the individual actions as isolated incidents, attributing them to coincidence or politeness or boredom on their part, missing the pattern that emerges when you step back and look at accumulated behavior over weeks or months rather than individual interactions in isolation. Watch for consistency in someone's attention toward you. If they're always the first to engage with your content, if they remember details from conversations you'd forgotten having, if they seem to know things about your life you don't remember telling them, if they create opportunities to help you or support you or just be near you, these behaviors accumulate into the message that says, "You matter to me," even when they never use those words. That says, "I want more connection than we currently have," even when they never explicitly request more. That says, "I have feelings I'm not stating," even when they maintain surface level casual energy in actual interactions. Some desperate communication uses proxy channels rather than direct contact. They're telling mutual friends how much they miss you, hoping word gets back. They're posting things on social media that are really meant for your eyes, even though they don't tag you. They're talking about you to anyone who will listen, creating atmosphere of their interest in you without directly communicating that interest to you, banking on gossip networks or digital algorithms or synchronicity to carry their message to you, since they can't seem to deliver it directly themselves. This proxy communication often fails because message gets distorted in transmission, because people don't pass along what they hear, because you're not following their social media closely enough to catch posts meant for you, because the entire indirect approach is inherently unreliable, but they're using it anyway because direct approach feels too scary or too vulnerable or too likely to result in rejection they're not ready to face. You might be surrounded by exactly this kind of proxy messaging. People mentioning in passing that someone asked about you, mutual friends trying to engineer situations where you'll be in same space, vague references in social media posts that make more sense if you knew they were thinking about you when they wrote them. But you're dismissing these as random, as meaningless, as certainly not coordinated effort by someone desperately trying to communicate without having to risk direct communication that could go badly. The desperation is in the trying, in the repeated attempts through different channels, in the hope that eventually something will get through, something will register, something will make you realize they've been reaching for you this entire time. Still, others are using behavioral communication instead of verbal, showing up for you in ways they hope you'll interpret as caring, making themselves useful or helpful or present, demonstrating through actions what they can't say with words. Hoping you'll read the love or desire or need in their consistent showing up, in their reliable presence, in their willingness to support or assist or just be there, because they believe actions speak louder than words, or because words feel impossible but actions feel manageable. They're communicating through their devotion, through their attention, through their investment of time and energy. Sending message, I care deeply, through every act of service or support or presence, desperately hoping you'll translate behavior into understanding without them having to make their feelings explicit and therefore vulnerable to rejection. This reflection invites you to consider who in your sphere has been showing up consistently, engaging regularly, creating connection opportunities in ways that might indicate they're trying to communicate something they're not saying directly. Let me clarify what desperately reveals about their internal state and motivation. Desperately suggests they're not casually trying to communicate, not making half-hearted attempt they could easily abandon, but investing significant emotional energy into being heard, being seen, being understood. And that desperation likely stems from the content of what they're trying to say, from the importance to them of you receiving this message, from the fact that what they want to communicate could change something between you, could shift the dynamic, could create opportunity or closure or clarity they need but can't access until you finally hear what they've been trying to tell you. In the intensity of desperate communication, there's vulnerability that makes the desperation even more painful, because they're exposing themselves through the very act of trying so hard, revealing how much they care through the persistence of their attempts, showing their hand even though they're trying to play it cool. And with each failed attempt to get through, the desperation likely intensifies. The need to be heard becomes more urgent. The frustration with your apparent obliviousness or your actual obliviousness grows, creating cycle where they try harder, which makes them more desperate, which makes their attempts potentially less effective, because desperation itself can be off-putting or can make their signals even less clear because they're operating from anxiety rather than clarity. It's essential you recognize that their desperation, if it's real, indicates you have power in this dynamic. Power that comes from being wanted, being needed, being the object of someone's intense focus and desire. And that power creates responsibility, not responsibility to reciprocate feelings you don't share, but responsibility to at least acknowledge receipt of message. Once you finally understand there's message being sent, responsibility to respond honestly, even if honestly means, I hear you, but I don't feel the same way, rather than continuing to miss signals that let you avoid having to address uncomfortable truth that someone wants, something from you that you might not want to give. You're missing their communication might be genuine obliviousness, or it might be unconscious avoidance, might be your system protecting you from having to deal with feelings or requests you're not ready to handle, might be strategic blindness that lets you maintain status quo without having to make difficult choices about someone's expressed interest or need. Some desperate communication stems from romantic feelings they haven't been able to confess. They love you or want you or can't stop thinking about you, and they've been trying to signal this through increased attention, through finding excuses to be near you, through volunteering help, through remembering everything you say, through being suspiciously available whenever you need anything, desperately hoping you'll notice the pattern, you'll see the truth beneath the friendly surface. You'll give them opening to speak more directly about feelings they're carrying alone until you acknowledge you're picking up what they're putting down. You might have someone in your life right now experiencing exactly this kind of unspoken romantic desperation. Someone who's been showing you they care without saying they care. Someone who's been hoping their actions communicate what their words don't. Someone who's waiting for sign from you that it's safe to be more explicit. Someone whose frustration is building with each interaction, where you treat them as just friend, when they're desperately wanting to be more than friend, when they're dying to ask you out but don't know how without risking the friendship if you don't feel the same way. Their desperation is visible if you know what to look for in how they light up when you enter a room, in how their attention tracks you even when they're supposedly focused elsewhere, in how they find reasons to touch you briefly or stand close to you or create moments alone with you, all broadcasting "I want you" in language you haven't been reading as romantic, because you weren't looking for romance from this source, weren't expecting interest from this person, weren't tuned to that frequency in your interactions with them. This reflection invites you to consider, if you learned someone close to you had been desperately trying to communicate romantic feelings without saying them directly, who would you guess that person is? Let me address what "you've been missing it" suggests about your role in the communication failure. You've been missing, it means the failure isn't entirely on their end for not communicating clearly. There's also element of you not being receptive, not being observant, not being tuned in is less than #0. 5 is greater than. Whether that's because you're distracted by other things in your life, or because you've assumed this person doesn't have feelings or messages for you, so you're not watching for signals from them, or because you're unconsciously avoiding receiving communication that would complicate your life or force choices you're not ready to make, or simply because their communication style and your receiving style are mismatched in ways that create static even when both parties are trying. In the responsibility you bear for reception, even when sender is primarily responsible for clarity of message, there's acknowledgement that communication is two-way process, that even clear messages can be missed by people not paying attention, that even obvious signals can be misinterpreted by people looking for different kind of signal, that your awareness and presence and openness to receiving matter as much as their courage and clarity in sending. If you've been dismissing their attempts, if you've been too busy to notice their attention, if you've been interpreting their interest as friendliness because you're not considering romantic possibility, if you've been missing the forest for the trees, seeing individual actions without recognizing the pattern they form, then you've been contributing to the communication breakdown. You've been part of why their desperate attempts keep failing to land. It's critical you examine whether your missing their communication has been genuine oversight or strategic avoidance. Whether you truly haven't noticed or whether you've been pretending not to notice because noticing would require response, would force acknowledgement, would create situation where you'd have to address their feelings or needs directly, is less than has honed. Zero hash is greater than, which might be uncomfortable if you don't reciprocate, might be scary if you do reciprocate but aren't sure about timing or readiness, might complicate comfortable friendship or working relationship. You don't want to risk changing, even though they're desperately trying to change it because current form doesn't satisfy what they're feeling or wanting. Some missing happens because you're genuinely focused elsewhere. You're in relationship, so you're not watching for romantic signals from anyone else. You're dealing with crisis that consumes your attention, so you're not noticing subtleties in anyone's behavior. You're depressed or overwhelmed in ways that make you less observant generally, less able to pick up on cues you'd normally catch. And in these cases, your missing isn't about them or even about avoidance. It's just about your capacity being directed elsewhere, your bandwidth being full, your awareness being narrowed by legitimate demands on your energy and focus. Whew. If this is your situation, their desperate attempts aren't landing not because you don't care, but because you literally don't have space to notice right now. And that's information they need, information that might shift their strategy if they knew you're genuinely not in position to receive rather than deliberately ignoring what they're sending. This reflection invites you to consider, is your missing their communication genuine obliviousness, unconscious avoidance, or circumstantial limitation based on what else is consuming your attention? Let me speak to what you should do now that you're being made aware of the missed communication. Start paying attention with different lens. Look back at recent interactions with people in your sphere and ask yourself if there are patterns you've been missing, behaviors that make more sense if interpreted as attempts to communicate something specific rather than just random actions. People who've been showing up more than coincidence would explain. People whose attention toward you has been remarkably consistent, people who seem to know more about your life than casual friendship would account for, people whose behavior suggests investment their words don't explicitly state. In the retrospective analysis of missed signals, you might experience sudden clarity, moments where you realize, oh, that's what that was about, or oh, that's why they kept doing that, where individual puzzle pieces you'd been seeing as unrelated suddenly form coherent picture, where someone's intentions become obvious once you're actually looking for them instead of missing them through inattention or misinterpretation. This clarity can be validating, can be unsettling, can be welcome or unwelcome, depending on who the person is and what you feel about their apparent interest or need. But regardless of your emotional response, the clarity gives you information you need to make informed choices about how to respond, about whether to acknowledge receipt of message, about whether to reciprocate or gently decline what's being offered or requested. It's important you don't immediately confront the person based on suspicion or new awareness. Don't put them on spot by saying, I just realized you've been trying to tell me something, unless you're certain, and unless direct confrontation serves both of you better than creating space for them to communicate in their own timing is less than has home. Zero hash is greater than, because if you're wrong about who's trying to communicate or what they're trying to say, you create awkwardness unnecessarily. And if you're right, but they're not ready for direct discussion, you force vulnerability they might not have chosen yet, which can damage trust or push them further into hiding rather than opening communication you're trying to facilitate. Better approach is often becoming more available to receive. creating openings in conversations where they could speak more directly if they choose, letting them know through your behavior that you're paying attention now, that you're receptive to deeper communication, that it's safe to be more explicit with you without demanding they be more explicit, without forcing revelation they might not be ready to make. Your increased receptivity might be enough to finally get the message through, might give them courage to speak more clearly, might close the gap between their desperate sending and your previous missing. Allowing communication to finally complete in ways that serve both your clarity and their need to be heard. Some situations require you to directly acknowledge that you've noticed their attention and you're either interested in exploring what it means or you're not interested but you want to clear the air, especially if their desperation is becoming visible in ways that create discomfort for them or for you or for people around you, especially if continued ambiguity is causing pain that clarity could relieve, even if clarity means disappointing news for them. Direct acknowledgement, handled with care and kindness, can be gift, can release them from desperate attempts to get through, can let them know they were heard, even if what they're hoping for isn't going to happen, can shift dynamic from painful limbo into honest, if difficult, reality that at least has the virtue of being resolved rather than suspended. This reflection invites you to consider, once you identify who's been trying to communicate and what they might be trying to say, how do you want to respond? They are desperately trying to tell you something. The communication has been persistent, intense, driven by need or desire or urgency on their part, but you've been missing it. The signals haven't been landing, the message hasn't been received, the attempts have been failing to break through your awareness, creating frustration for them and obliviousness for you that this message is trying to correct, trying to wake you up to communication that's been happening around you, beneath your notice, in frequencies you haven't been monitoring, through channels you haven't been watching. And your work now is awareness, paying attention with new lens, looking for patterns you've been missing, opening yourself to receive communication that's been bouncing off your defenses or your distraction or your obliviousness, deciding how you want to respond once you finally understand what's been trying to reach you, honoring both their courage in trying and your truth in responding. Whether that response is reciprocation or kind declination or request for more time or clarity about what exactly they've been trying to say, since interpretation of signals is inherently less reliable than explicit communication. May you see what you've been missing. May you hear what's been trying to reach you. May you respond with honesty and kindness. May you trust that awareness serves everyone, even when awareness complicates things. Someone's been broadcasting, you've been tuned elsewhere. Now you know to listen. What you hear determines what happens next. Remember this: when someone's desperately trying to communicate with you and you've been missing it, becoming aware creates choice point. Moment where you get to decide what to do with the information, how to handle knowing someone wants or needs something from you. And your response, whatever it is, should honor both their vulnerability in trying and your truth in receiving, should be clear enough to prevent further desperate attempts, should be kind enough to respect their courage, should be honest enough to give them actual answer rather than ambiguity that keeps them hoping or wondering or trying when trying is futile because you're not interested in what they're offering or asking for. They've been desperate to be heard. You've finally heard. Now the question is what you'll do with the hearing, how you'll respond to message that's been trying so hard to reach you, whether you'll reciprocate or decline or need time to process. But whatever you choose, choose clearly, choose kindly, choose with full awareness that someone's been waiting for your response, someone's been hoping for your recognition, someone's been desperate for you to finally understand what they've been trying so hard to tell you. The message has been sent repeatedly. You're receiving it now. Response is yours to craft. Make it honest, make it kind,